Morning.
Morning. How are you?
Early risers.
Yeah.
Morning. I'm early, I believe.
How are we? Yeah.
Good,
Yeah,
thanks,
really
Robin.
good, thanks. You?
Yeah.
I
Fine.
think.
Fine.
Good.
Yeah. Just been practicing my my talk. I'm going to give a talk on forecasting. So see how it goes.
Excellent. I was just going to check Zoom was working properly. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been on a Zoom call.
That's strange. I seem to be on Zoom most of my day.
Yeah, I'm a little bit the same.
Well, I've been happened to be between jobs when this happened, so yeah, not so much on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel that pain, Kevin.
Make the
Morning,
most of it.
Barry.
Make the most of
Morning,
it.
Morning,
folks.
Barry.
Good morning. How are we all?
Okay.
Really good. You?
Yes, I'm good, thanks. Good. Can't complain at all. Bit of a grey dreich day here in Glasgow today, but can't have it all.
No.
Just today, Barry.
No, Craig. No. Well, I have to say, I think like most of the country, we've had had an absolutely cracking, a blistering hot May.
Yeah.
Through probably the strongest of the lockdown conditions. Now that things are relaxing a bit, the weather's definitely taking a turn for the worse. I blame the golfers. Now that the golf courses are open again, I blame the golfers. We live right next to a golf course, and it's it's quite interesting. It was very good of them. They didn't need to, but back in March when all of this started, very quickly there was big notices went up on the entrance into the golf club. Dog walkers and exercisers, you're very welcome. Use the grounds, use the facilities, which we did. The dogs thoroughly enjoyed a good few walks around the golf course. Of course, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, that's all changed, and nowadays it's a procession down my street, up and down my street, of all the golfing trolleys and buggies. And you'll be more used to this than many of us, Kevin, having run a golf course in the past.
Oh yes.
Plethora, the variety of different golf buggies that are available.
Hi, Robin.
Hi.
From the very
Morning.
flimsy to the ride-on powered. It's
Kevin, every time I see you, you're somebody else.
Oh, Rob Levick, damn you.
today, Matthew, I'm going to be.
That's an embarrassment, isn't it? Barry knows why that happens,
If you want.
I hope. It's just for tax purposes. Kevin, how are you? Kevin.
Good. Very good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good.
Excellent. There's been a bit of additional beard growth there.
Well, yeah. Oh, well, we didn't do a Zoom before, so I've had this for a while, but this is about as close as I could get it.
Yes, we were on the phone last time we spoke.
I was going, well, my hair's getting out of control. I was going down the kind of Kenny Rogers look for a while, but I need to stop that.
Morning, Gillian.
It's
Morning,
It's
Daniel.
not a good look now anyway.
a fair description for many of us, Kevin.
Yes, I know.
You haven't.
Well, premature grey. I mean, that's what happens, you know. This is just gets out of control.
Morning.
Morning,
Hey,
Kevin.
Kevin.
How you doing?
I'm very well. How's yourself?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad. It'd be better if we were all back at work doing what we should be doing.
Well,
Won't be
these
long
things are
now.
sent to try us.
Fingers crossed.
Hi, Gillian. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Just finding myself actually very, very busy, which is quite strange. So it's quite nice just joining quite a few forums and calls just to keep in touch with everyone and just give a wee bit of advice as much as I can.
Good.
And just
Good.
keep my eye to the ground to see what's out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Morning, Sean.
It's the best way.
Morning.
Stefan.
How are you?
Okay.
Morning.
Good.
So we've got another bumper list this morning, Robin. 62, I think, the last I saw from you.
Yeah, if they all appear, there'll be 62. I mean, there's always a few that fall out, but yeah, Definitely need for a wide screen today.
Get onto 2 pages, you'll be doing well.
Oh, well, we usually find about kind of 50 to 60% actually attends, so even you know,
So it's just like real life then.
very much so.
Yeah.
Very much. I think we know that song, Kevin. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, that's true.
You just don't know which 50% are going to turn up. That's
Aye, very true.
wow.
Very true. Morning, Carl. Nicola, welcome. Good to see you.
Morning, thank you.
Morning.
Likewise.
Morning.
Hi, Sean.
Morning.
Morning.
This has got the feeling, Kevin, of yesterday's for networking. We were Kevin Roach and I were on an online networking yesterday. We were about 2 minutes before start time. I think it was only about 4 of us there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And everybody rushed in at 1 minute to go.
Yeah. Mr. Networking looking for a code at 30 seconds to go.
Well,
Anyway, no problem.
you might have noticed that I've certainly noticed the trend. Colin hasn't really mastered technology. That is
No. No, he's doing okay. Well, I got him. He's got a couple of names for the commercial property guys, so we'll see what happens.
Right, good.
With this thing. Yeah,
good. That's
we
a
go.
good start.
filling up. Yeah. Oh, it's not 10 o'clock yet either. So this is
No,
No, we're still
2 minutes to go. They're all coming in.
It was Robin's email saying that we were going to start the meeting a few minutes early.
That's a good idea.
It's novel thing of networking, Kevin, which you know we're not entirely used to.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning. Morning, Martin.
Morning.
Morning all. Morning, Barry.
Martin, good to see you.
How are you?
On my amplified video from earlier, we got up from number 2 to number 3. We're not at number 11 yet. Your volume's still very low.
Now we're getting there.
Folk are rushing in now.
Yeah.
Somebody said free drinks at 10.
Did you say drink, Martin?
Right.
Yeah.
When are you going to
First
manage
round
to
on
do
you,
the,
is it?
the bacon and the coffee, bacon and
What's
rolls?
that? Martin's got his wallet open.
Jeff.
I think this is one of the things that nobody knows really anything about it. It's not self-done. Yeah. Good morning.
So that's just at 31 at the moment, Robin. Looking good.
Yeah.
Morning. Yeah, I've got like this. There's a place on the
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
How are you?
Morning.
Morning.
I've had them for 4 or 5 years. 6, 7 years.
Morning,
I've got
DC.
my numbers at uni. Certainly before I was teaching, so it must be more than 6 or 7 years. It must be like 10 years.
Hello, David.
This is one of the more conservative ones. All right.
Morning, Robin.
Excellent.
Hi.
We'll be expecting to
Hi,
Hi, everybody.
see them next week.
Wait,
Go.
Nearly
Two of them.
We,
30.
Two of them are
Robin,
that right.
mindful of everybody's time and schedule, so shall
Definitely don't
we,
wear them about around the
shall we
street.
make a start?
sounds like a plan.
So, good morning, everybody. Very warm welcome to this morning's latest online hotel forum. Great to see many familiar faces and quite a number of new first attendees this morning as well. So those of you the first time joining us, you're very, very welcome. You might have noticed I'm not Robin Williams this morning. I am Barry Clark. Robin's one of our key speakers this morning. So just to help balance out the voices who you're listening to, I'm your host with the most for this morning's event. Great to see you all this morning. So I'm Barry Clark from Dunedin Consultancy. A very warm welcome to you. So since our last forum 2 weeks ago, gosh, there's been quite a lot happening really. So before we go into we've got 3 guest speakers this morning, today's forum. I thought I would just spend a couple of minutes, and I do genuinely mean a couple of minutes, with a bit of a state of the nation's update on some of the key activities, particularly from a hotelier's perspective, over the last couple of weeks. I may well call upon 1 or 2 of you to give us an update in your particular part of the country as we're quickly flying around. I'm going to start up in Scotland for no other reason than that's where I'm speaking to you from this morning. Scotland, we are hotly anticipating Thursday's press conference from the Scottish Government, where I think safe to say very much the anticipation is that we'll be moving into phase 2 of the lockdown route map. For hospitality people, phase 2 means that a limited opportunity for those businesses with outdoor food and beverage space to start servicing once again, to reopen for your customer base. Certainly been very evident over the last couple of weeks since we moved into phase 1 of the route map north of the border. We've seen quite a number of your well-known takeaways, your kind of Costa Coffees, McDonald's, Starbucks, quite noticeably a number of those reopening, albeit for takeaway service and delivery service only. The real hot news for people north of the border, the Scottish Government has been very much openly talking about 15th of July as the key date for moving into phase 3, which will allow hoteliers to reopen for indoor food and beverage, and most importantly, open for accommodation services. The way that's being talked about north of the border, I think it's now going to be quite difficult for the Scottish Government to backtrack on that. The encouraging news from them was acknowledgement from the Scottish Government that the industry does need that lead time in order to get the supply chain reactivated. So hopeful, encouraging signs north of the border. Heading south of the border into England, no clear indication yet really from the Westminster Government. 4th of July that previously has been spoken about still seems to be very much the target date, but there's a growing call publicly across social media from operators in England for some real clear guidance and communication from the Westminster Government in terms of being able to reopen on 4th of July. Northern Ireland, similar picture. 3rd of July is the target date there for reopening in Northern Ireland for hotels and for internal food and beverage. And maybe just quickly head across to David Collins, who can give us a wee update on what's happening south of the border there in Ireland, in the Republic.
Thanks, Barry. Yes, we have a revised reopening date for 22nd of June, brought forward from the 22nd of July. That's for hotels, restaurants, and effectively pubs as well. Pubs will reopen more likely as restaurants, hybrid restaurants, because there are various restrictions on pubs. However, if you're serving food, you're entitled to open on the 29th of June. And as I said, that's been brought forward from the 22nd of July. So it's effectively the guts of a month being accelerated. I'm curious, by the way, why there's a difference between the North opening on the 3rd of July and the proposed reopening for the UK on the 4th. I thought that they were distinct, frankly, but obviously not. But good news nevertheless.
Thanks, David. Thanks for that, DC. I think it's certainly a case in the UK that the 4 home nations, let's say, treading a different path, hopefully to reach the same destination, and hopefully to reach that destination at the same time. But the 4 devolved administrations, or I should say Westminster and the 3 devolved administrations, certainly seem to be taking a different route map to get to that final destination. And I suppose you do have to question how helpful for the industry that actually is. Whether you're in Carlisle or in Gretna, is the risk factor really all that different? Just the fact that you've got an administrative border in between you. Just a little housekeeping detail. Could I ask? Be really grateful if you could mute yourself while you're not speaking. There's just a bit of background noise coming through there, which is a bit distracting. You're very, very welcome to take yourself off mute to contribute. But if when you're not speaking, if you could just keep yourself on mute, would be much appreciated. Just to round up that little kind of state of the nations, the one particular area that I couldn't really research any definitive information on was Wales. I did some online research this morning and couldn't really get any definitive information there that seemed to separate it from the English. If you're in that part of the world and you have some more contemporary information, then perhaps pop some details in the chat box. Be much grateful for everybody. I think other key thing that you may have picked up in the media this morning, there's been an announcement from the Office of National Statistics in terms of employment and unemployment figures. I think not unexpected, the headline there is that the employment figures for the UK have seen a drop of 600,000 people in employment, and those are figures as of April. So they don't really take in the May and June aspect of lockdown. Again, some regional differences there. The headline unemployment figure for the UK as a whole is static at just under 3%, but we are seeing some regional variation. In Scotland, the headline unemployment figure has gone up 1%, now sitting at 4.5%. I think not unexpected, and you know, worthwhile picking up that we're also now beginning to see a number of the bigger operators in our industry who are I think unexpectedly, you know, unavoidably now having to look at some serious restructuring. We've seen Crieff Hydro family of hotels, we've seen McDonald hotels, and currently also Apex hotels who've indicated that they're starting restructuring consultation processes. We know that in many ways the worst is probably yet to come in terms of how we're getting our industry and our business out of the situation we find ourselves in. Just briefly to pick up on another few headline issues that have come out in the last couple of weeks. Now that you probably are thinking about the reopening phase of your business, we've had a lot of discussions in this forum previously about cleanliness and the hygiene factors within your business. Quality and Tourism within the last couple of weeks has published its cleanliness accreditation. I believe we've got a link to that we can put in the post forum email. If you haven't already seen it, makes very interesting reading. The Institute of Hospitality has also been publishing a lot of advice for operators covering a whole host of aspects, from housekeeping to food and beverage to maintaining communication with your teams, and advice in terms of onboarding people back into your teams who you're bringing back from furlough. Lots of very interesting information there, and I know we've got quite a number of Institute members within the group, and we should be able to share some of that data. I think one of the conversations that Robin and I have been having over the last couple of weeks, I think one of his comments that really stuck with me that I wanted to share this morning, when Robin said to me the other day, you know, we need to get across the fact that this isn't a readjustment, this isn't getting back to normal, this is the beginning of the new way of us operating our business as an industry moving forward, and you know, that's going to it's going to bring along a number of challenges, as we're all well aware of. So there's a bit of a state of the nations, a quick roundup of the key activities that have been happening in the last couple of weeks. We've got a bumper agenda for you this morning. As I say, we've got 3 guest speakers, and I'm conscious of keeping the schedule. We don't really want to run much past 11 o'clock this morning. So without further ado, let me go across to the first of our key speakers this morning. I'm delighted to welcome Robin Williams, the real power behind this online hotel forum. All credit to Robin for the admin, the marketing, and the activity to build this group that we've established over the last couple of months. Robin's going to share his thoughts with us this morning on that thorny topic, how to forecast your business in such uncertain and unclear times. So Robin, thank you very much. Over to you.
Hi there. Hi all. Thank you, Barry. I'm afraid I'm gonna put it into PowerPoint because there's a lot of stuff that's sort of like it's easier to demonstrate, but I'll try to keep it as light as possible. So I'm just about to share the screen. Where are we? There we go. So I hope you can all see that. Okay. Yeah. I'll be sending out a copy of these slides afterwards, but if you want to take notes, feel free to do so. So my greatest mentor when I started in finance many years ago said to me that the most important thing in any hotel is understanding the revenue. By understanding where the revenue comes from and how it is achieved, it'll help us to improve that revenue and control the costs accordingly. So why forecasting? Why do we need forecasting? Well, first of all, I don't know about you, but the majority of budgets are already out of date before they actually get approved. It's very difficult to forecast 15 months ahead how you're going to finish a year. And with a pandemic, it'll be even more difficult. So also there's nothing more demoralizing for your team than trying to chase after a budget which is just not achievable, and nothing more demotivating than actually having a budget that's too low and the team are just not forcing themselves to make that effort to make a better result. So I often associate the budget is like a roadmap. Before we make a journey, most of us will look at a map, plan a route. Yet when we get on the road, there'll always be roadworks, accidents, we may get lost, which is why we rely on the GPS to help us find the best route to get us back on track to our destination. That for me is what a good forecast does. It helps the team redirect the business to ensure it gets as close to the end budget as possible, even if the journey takes a different route. So, and also a good forecast is important because it helps us control our costs. These days, no hotel can afford to wait till the end of the month to see how they are performing. They need systems that are updated with forecast and actual revenues on a daily basis to help them keep control of those costs. Forecasting is a process of learning, experimenting, adjusting, which will help develop revenue and make corrections where things don't go quite to plan. So when should we be doing forecasting? Well, under normal conditions, we should be reviewing our forecast every 2 weeks. Each time you should be looking ahead at least a month, and also ensuring that the approximate 3 months are within a certain level so that we can control the cash flow. Obviously under lockdown, under COVID situation, post-lockdown, we will be looking to review forecast almost daily, looking to find where we can gain revenue, where we can control revenue, where things have become apparent that they're no longer going to count anymore. As Barry was mentioning, we're looking at a new norm now, and we will have to be looking to see how that new norm develops. Also, make sure you include your team in the process, because this will motivate them to achieve those results. So how should we forecast? Well, first of all, the key is to forecast by day. Forecasting is a learning process. If you only practice forecasting for a month, once a year, you aren't going to improve your accuracy. Whereas if you're regularly forecasting each day of a week, your accuracy will improve, and that will help your business to move forward. Some hotels make the mistake of forecasting by month and then dividing by 30. All this will do is give you 30 days of difference, and you won't learn anything from that process, and you won't be able to improve your accuracy. If you forecast day by day, you'll soon get to a position where some of the days come within a fair distance of your forecast. You can then concentrate on the variances you do see and why they have varied. Was there an event you did think of? Did it rain that Sunday? And so on. By learning from the variances, you'll be able to improve your revenue generation the next time these incidents occur. So also, the different days have different levels of business. If you have a month that has an extra weekend in it, your totals for that month are going to be significantly different. And more importantly, in the current climate, we don't know how business will perform. You may need to adjust your forecast up and down almost daily, but the process will help you to learn what the new normal is and identify areas where you can improve your business. As I said before, you need to analyze your costs to revenue daily, so ensure that you don't lose track of them. So if your revenue is fluctuating, you can more easily control how you're controlling those costs. Another key aspect to forecasting is make sure you include those figures in your daily report. In that way, you'll be able to see how you're planning to finish the month compared to your previous target. I always include my original forecast from the beginning of the month as a comparison for the end projected. If your team know where they're heading to, it's more likely they will achieve their goal. By comparing your daily results with the forecast you made for that day, you identify easily which areas of the business have gone well and which met challenges, and so will your team. If a hotel is struggling to make forecast, I have on occasions slightly reset the forecast for a certain day, and when they achieve that forecast, I've made a big song and dance about it, congratulating the team, because in that way, they are more likely to be motivated to make that forecast every day, even when it's more challenging. Team leaders should know they can go to the forecast and check what their target is for the day before service starts. In that way, they will strive to achieve it. That extra dish, that extra glass of wine, whatever it takes to beat that target. The more you include your team in the process of forecasting and reviewing, the more they will be motivated to achieve the goals of the business. And what may have appeared like an impossible goal will become more attainable. How do you build a forecast? Well, you can't just pluck forecast figures out of thin air. Nobody's clairvoyant these days. So you have to base your forecast on solid formats, solid figures. Sorry. These days, most PMS will give you an OTB report in an Excel format, and simple formulas can then link that to your forecast, so you can review them regularly. I always keep a copy of my previous OTB every time I update my new OTB figures. In that way, I can see clearly what pickup I've had since then. This will help to identify days that are selling well and days that need a rate increase, or days which are slow and may need encouragement. Keeping track on your OTB progression for the future weekends could warn you when you need to impose minimum stay to avoid having a hotel empty on a Friday night, for example. To build your forecast, always base your occupancy figures on OTB plus pickup. Your pickup rate will no doubt be higher than your OTB rates, and this should be based on what you are selling now. Use a valid relationship to calculate that room pickup value. This normally may be budget less your OTB. However, at the present time, you may be working on the previous average of days, less the OTB, and slowly build it up based on how the performance goes. By testing formulas and relationships, you will learn which best suits your business and help you to develop more effective rate strategies until your forecast becomes highly accurate, and which will allow you better control over those costs. In F&B, you should be using relevant KPIs to build up your revenue figures. You should know your sleeper capture rates, have a good idea of how many external clients you have on each day of the week, and using reasonable average rates for food and beverage, you'll come to a figure that makes sense both to you and your team and is therefore more attainable. Not only will it make sense, it's easier to automate, but it will keep your team identifying, but will help your team identify what change is on a particular day. Were there more covers than expected? Did you have more residents, or were there more external covers? Did you make that average spend you normally achieve? Ask your team why that could have been. In some hotels, they've even been able to flex their forecast based on the mix of guests in-house. it could be that leisure guests have a higher capture rate than conference guests. By studying the differences, you will learn more about your business, make improvements to your business, and improve your forecasting. If you don't have the necessary data now, start building that data, start collecting it. Learn which relationships and statistics have a greater effect on your business. That will help you to learn how your business is working. As you build your forecasting tool, it will then become the basis of your budget, and this in turn will also be more reliable. So as far as revenue is concerned, forecasts will guide you and your business. Detail does not have to mean more work. A lot of it can be automated with Excel. By building a forecast based on KPIs, you learn more about your business, and the more time you spend on getting it right to start with, the quicker it will be later and the more beneficial to grow your business. Now, I must admit, Barry set me a bit of a challenge when he sent out his reminder on Thursday. I had planned on only doing revenue forecasting, but he mentioned I would be including cash flow. So I've put together some slides from the tutorials I usually run for finance teams. I won't go into too much technicalities, but I thought it would be good to useful to highlight the main differences as to why your monthly cash flow does not resemble your profit and loss. So first of all, let's look at the money coming into business. Your cash flow forecast needs to be driven by your revenue forecast, which is why the previous section was so important. It's important to understand that the cash coming into the bank in 1 month is a combination of the deposits for the future, sales ledger payments from the past, and cash and card payments taken from clients directly. Every hotel will have a different distribution of these, but most hotels in themselves will have a similar distribution month on month. And this will allow us to create a business model and make assumptions as to how much cash will be coming in each month. It's also important to remember that the majority of all those incomes come with VAT on top, which we later have to pay back to the government. Currently, we also have grants coming in, such as money from the furlough scheme. So in forecasting your payments for payroll, you should always flex your variable payroll by occupied rooms and covers, not by revenue. Your rooms cost will be the same to clean whether you've sold them at £100 or £200. And likewise, unless you have a really empty restaurant, your staffing will be geared by how many people you expect to serve, not your average spends. Also bear in mind that the amount you paid out each month is the net pay plus your previous month's PAYE obligations. When forecasting supplier payments, you need to split them into those which regularly have VAT and those that don't. As with payroll, your variable expenses need to be flexed by your stats, not revenue, except obviously TA commissions, which should be a percentage, an average percentage of whatever revenue you have. Most of these figures should be driven by your budget or by past performance. And any decent P&L report should allow you to evaluate these averages, these fixed and these variables, to be able to incorporate them into your future cash flow. Also bear in mind that in general, the suppliers you pay this month are your P&L expenses from last month, as long as you're paying suppliers up to date. Apart from not having to compensate for VAT on some supplier payments like food cost and credit card payments, there will be some which are paid annually or unevenly over the year. And this will affect your cash flow regardless of whether the cost has been distributed in your P&L. So finally, as mentioned earlier, you have to pay the government the VAT taken less VAT paid to suppliers. And unless you are doing a major renovation, the result will always be to pay. These payments are usually made 2 months after the quarter, which means you may be paying out the VAT taken in the higher summer months in the autumn when you no longer have those high incomes. That is why it is all so important to have a good cash flow to guide your business forward, especially at the moment. Most banks at the moment, if they're asking for funding, are asking for a 12-month cash flow. My hotels, I've actually supplied a 24-month cash flow because I don't believe the businesses will really recover until after next summer. And so by showing the banks that there is actually a forward progression over 2 years, gives them greater confidence that you actually know your business will survive. Well, I hope that's all been interesting, and I hope it's not sort of overdone it on the Excel. If anybody's got any questions, please feel free to fire away.
Robin, right, it's Jeff here. Just a couple of questions. Do you use Zero with add-on apps such as Float, Fluidly, Futurely, or Atom? Or
I tend to find Zero. The problem with Zero is that it doesn't have the capacity for the statistical reporting that most hotels have. I've tried experimenting with it, and also I do a lot of import. Most of my journals, my invoices, and everything I import automatically from a pre-calculated Excels and stuff. So I'm old school, I'm afraid. I use Sage 50 and export all the data into a format in Excel that gives me all the flexibility I can have to create very highly statistical P&Ls. I'd say most of my P&Ls are 50% statics and 50% actual, like nitty-gritty monetary figures.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Jeff, just picking up on your question there, David Collins and myself certainly have experience of using Zero in a hotel environment for the financial accounting perspective. So if it's something you want to have a chat about, then I'm sure DC and myself, we can have an email, have a chat outside of the forum. Any other questions for Robin? Anyone else got any queries they want to pick up?
Just to add to that, Barry, if I may, and thanks for that presentation, Robin. I think, if anything, it just demonstrates how important the numbers are in this business, particularly now. I had a conversation with somebody earlier today whereby we're looking at management accounts for the last 3 months. We're probably just going to do a consolidated set of management accounts. The budget's out the window, obviously, for 2020. But one thing that we've tried to adopt ourselves is a very granular approach to managing pricing, particularly when it comes to rooms. And without sounding too much like an anorak, the fact is that we break down, in terms of, again, our pricing into individual segments for our primary markets, whether they're corporate, leisure, or whatever. And we do that on a very, again, granular micro level, so that over time you get a very good picture as to how your individual market segments behave. Important that we keep a keen eye on our competitive sets for each individual hotel, how they move, rate, etc., pricing per room, per day, per segment. And that type of detailed approach to your pricing and rate setting, I think it's referred to as open pricing, whereby you're matching demand and supply, but doing it again on a sort of regular, systematic rather, day by day, week by week, month by month, over time builds a certain muscle memory within your team, whereby they have very potent set of figures to rely on in terms of projecting demand. We have a very simple Excel-based spreadsheet, which I can share via yourself and Barry, which allows us to, for example, analyze again that pickup on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis versus budget, and also versus achieved for last year. And it's remarkable how accurate that becomes in a very, very short space of time. And once you've got control of the numbers, it's much easier to get control of the business. So I might ping that on to after this call, and if you want to share it, by all means do.
Yeah, no, quite true, David. I mean, a lot of a lot of room revenue management is based on quite sort of like analyzing how your pickup was that time last year, how your pickup was last week, and just developing those characteristics to then build up sort of a prediction for the future.
Very much so. I'd endorse what both of you have been saying there in the past few seconds. I mean, before we move on, just picking up on a couple of comments there. I think Robin, thanks for that that look at the forecasting and cash flow projection model. I know from personal experience, one of the key things I find when I'm called to come in and ask to help hotel owners and operators, particularly at the smaller end of the marketplace, the tool that's often missing, and it's the thing that really means that they're stabbing in the dark, is that there's no financial forecasting, there's no kind of daily flash reporting, and really those owners and operators, they just haven't got a clue where they are. They're constantly looking 4, 6, 8 weeks in the past because they're just reacting to month-end accounts. And we all know in so many cases, we've all been in that situation where you're 2 or 3 weeks after month-end before you're seeing your month-end accounts. With all the technology and the help that's available in this day and age, it doesn't have to be like that. There's so much available that can give you all that data at your fingertips. And particularly, part of the reason I kind of threw the challenge last week about cash flow is I can't over stress enough at the moment that for the foreseeable future, for the rest of this year and into next year, it's cash flow that's going to be king. It might sound like I'm stating the obvious. The thing that is going to kill businesses in the next 6 to 12 months is not necessarily the fact that you're making only minimal or you're at break-even point. It's going to be cash flow that kills so many businesses in the foreseeable future. So I really encourage you not necessarily to get fixated with profit margins and operating as you were this time last year or the year before. It's all about cash flow for the foreseeable future. That's what will keep you in business. Folks, thanks very much indeed. Robin, thanks ever so much for your input. David as well, thanks for your comments there. Going to move swiftly on because we've got a lot of content to get in this morning. One of the key areas that will help us to get our industry back into a healthier position is a resurgence in both the domestic but also the inbound tourism coming into the UK, especially for Scotland and very significantly for Ireland as well. In a second, I'm going to hand over to Luke Martin, who's going to give us a bit of an overview and an update on where particularly the aviation industry is at the moment. Just before I hand over to Luke, I thought it was very timely and worth mentioning something that happened to me yesterday, which I've not heard for about 8 or 9 weeks, which was a plane flying over my house heading into Glasgow Airport. We live under one of the main routes into Glasgow Airport for arrivals. The thing that struck me was the fact that I noticed there was a plane heading over about this time yesterday morning, and again, tea time yesterday when I was walking the dog. I've not heard that for weeks. So albeit there may only be a handful of flights going in and out of Glasgow, an encouraging sight that at least there was something heading over my head. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Luke, who's going to give us an update on where that particular industry is at and how it impacts so importantly upon our hotel industry. Luke, thank you.
Oh, are you able to enable screen sharing at all, Barry?
It's me. Just a minute.
Robin, if you can make a co-host.
There you go.
Okay. So essentially, thank you for having me again. So one of the key things I've been doing is looking at aviation recovery, and it's quite interesting, Barry, because EasyJet have just started scheduled services back to Glasgow as of yesterday. So that will have been the plane you heard flying over your house. Now, the key thing to consider is with everybody else, aviation recovery is going to be a very slow start to get back up. And I put this slide up essentially to say we're in Q2 2020, they are just starting to get aviation back up and running. And as you can see from the slide, they're not actually forecasting essentially a full recovery back to what we saw pre-COVID until 2022. And the key challenge with that is there's a lot of trepidation both within aviation, governments around when is it safe to start the planes flying. Now, for those of you that may have a reliance on the international tourist basis, this is obviously going to impact on the difference between domestic staycations, people staying within the UK, but the tourist market is a big market out there, and it's one of the key ones that we need to look at. So last week there was a poll done around, okay, when does the aviation industry in itself think that it's going to get back to those 2019 levels, so the levels we saw pre-COVID? As you can see, take away the 28% that had no idea, it's looking at 2 to 3 years. So we're looking at 2 to 3 years before you start to see the numbers of foreign tourists coming into the country, before we see planes flying as they were before. So it's how can you, I guess, remarket your business towards that domestic staycation market, whilst considering that you will start to see a trickle of foreign tourists returning to the UK. Now, this is kind of, I think, pretty much similar across all the markets, but this is kind of what they're looking at the moment around how do we get passengers back on planes? How do we get tourists visiting countries? So as we see similar things to the hospitality industry, we need to have the capability to do that. So similar to for hotels, you need to have the capability to open your business, get people back in. There's then the whole contentious issue, as Barry's already alluded to, around the travel experience. So the biosafety, the cleaning, how can we stop COVID-19 spreading? And then the other part of it is around how do we restore confidence? How do we get people traveling? But also, how do we keep it affordable? When you look at some airlines are only running 7 routes for the rest of the year. There's already been an inflation in cost of travel because the airlines need to make money as they put the planes back in the sky. So that again is going to have a bit of a knock-on impact. Now, the key thing to look at as well is where are we across, and this is primarily EU focused, with the approach to quarantine or no quarantine. One of the biggest challenges at the moment that's been coming up on a lot of the calls is the UK is enforcing this blanket quarantine of 14 days, which is leading to a lot of people saying, well, why should I go to the UK if I've got to stay in my hotel room for 14 days before I can do anything, when I can go to other countries that have a reciprocal agreement and I don't have to stay in a room for 14 days. We are hopefully going to potentially see a change. There's obviously been this challenge in the courts from BA and the wider IAG group trying to get the quarantine lifted. How confident are we that's going to happen? Probably not at the moment. The government will say we're going to follow the scientific advice. We're going to follow the advice from the biosecurity team that they have set up monitoring this. So key issues that are affecting, as I've said, one of the other things you're going to see is a lot of staff within the aviation industry, within the travel industry, are still being laid off as of today. There were 500 Virgin pilots laid off yesterday. There are more layoffs expected over the forthcoming weeks. There's a lack of willingness within the EU travel market around we don't want to travel to the UK unless we have to because of this 14-day quarantine. As a result, we're seeing a huge increase in certain areas of staycations. So if you take the caravan parks down at Woolacombe Bay in Devon, for those of you who may know them, they're already fully booked for August. With, I think there's only about 2 or 3 dates you can get. And obviously we've still got the closure of a tourist attraction, so there's not a big impetus for foreign tourists to travel at the moment until things start to open up and we start to see a bigger opening. We've talked about the quarantine. I've put this up just to kind of give you an idea that if you do have guests that are staying that are subject to this quarantine, there is a required process they have to go through. So they have to give the details of where they're staying. You may get, as individual hoteliers, phone calls asking you to confirm, are these guests staying with you? Have they been going out conforming to a quarantine? The other thing to consider about is if you do have guests that do travel, do stay with you, and they then develop symptoms, they will then look to contact trace through your hotel anybody else they may have been in contact with, and including your staff. And the advice will be to then, as per the current government guidelines, is to isolate for 14 days. A bit of confusion, and there's been questions asked centrally around, okay, so how does this affect guests that are staying in hotels? And I think we're waiting to find out. And then there's just a very quick summary is what does quarantine mean for you as hoteliers? You will get random phone calls. You may need to consider, if you have guests staying with you that have travelled from out of the country, how can you modify your way of dealing with these guests when they're supposed to be self-isolating? And also consider what additional information you may want to gather, you may need to gather, so that you can identify these guests. And obviously, how can you control if they need to go out of the hotel so they don't come into contact with your domestic guests? Because one of the key things is, again, is you need to follow the old principles of only go out for medical care, urgent shopping, one piece of exercise per day. So how will that affect some of you if you have smaller establishments? Do you need to look at I guess a different entrance and exit? And that's it really. So I kept it short and sweet. Hope that was useful.
Luke, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for summarising a lot of information, a lot of quite complex and conflicting information that we see in the media. Thanks very much for that concise focus there. Any queries, any comments anyone like to share with Luke? It's an interesting comment from Kat just there in the chat box, which I'll pick up if you perhaps haven't seen it. Having some extended family who are based out in the Western Isles off the west coast of Scotland. Kat makes a comment there about they're seeing some demand appearing, some inquiry and booking demand, simply from the fact of some health services, those routine treatments and services that people in remote areas need to travel to, the likes of Inverness, Glasgow, and I dare say the same will be the same in Ireland and in areas of England. People need to come in from those rural areas to see routine health services which haven't been available for the last 3 or 4 months. Just curious if anyone else is seeing any input there. If you happen to have properties that are in those key hospital areas, if you're in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Birmingham, Coventry, those kind of areas, just something worth thinking about and keeping an eye on. Luke, thanks very much indeed. Okay, let's move on, folks, to our third key speaker this morning. Somebody that I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with a number of times over recent years. I've said a number of times myself recently, it strikes me, and I'm not unthankful that I'm not at the sharp end of the events industry right now. Having managed some quite significant M&E and also wedding venues over past years, I'm not sad to not be in that industry right now, and I really do feel for those who have hotel and venue properties that are reliant upon those big social venues, because we just don't really know what the future lies for those big kind of wedding and conference and event venues. the person to give us a bit of input. I've asked one of my contacts, Kevin Holland, to come and join us this morning to give us his input along with his business partner, Martin Dempster. So without further ado, let me hand over to Kevin, who's going to give us an update on the MICE sector and what he feels being the route forward for those conference and events venues. Kevin, thanks very much indeed.
Morning, Barry. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Robin, for inviting myself and my colleague Martin, who's on here somewhere, to join you. At Trident here, we support independent venues and hotels with getting in front of the agency market, in effect, and supporting proactive sales to agents and corporates. But it's all been very difficult, as it has been for all of us, but the way we've been keeping our venues together and sharing is we've been running regular meetings such as this, but we've been having guests. So the feedback from a lot of the guests that we have, they've been agents. I mean, we've had Chris Peacock from Conference Care, Intel, Venues and Events International, and they're all saying that although they have clients who are keen to restart having meetings and events, because of a lack of clarity from the government on exactly what is going to be happening, when our venue is going to be allowed to open, and what restrictions they're going to put on them, they're all saying that they're wiping out 2020. They don't see much happening in the meetings and events industry, probably until Q1, Q2 of 2021. On a regular basis, we're hearing of venues that are closing. Agents too are suffering, especially the smaller agents, because of their the way the commission and their business model works, in as much as they've lost all of their revenue for 2020. If they rebook for 2021, they're not going to get any revenue until later in the year. There is a tremendous amount of frustration with the government, and Barry alluded to, you know, there was supposed to be an announcement on June 15th as to what was happening, but this hasn't happened. Martin Fullard is from Conference News, is working quite hard to try and get something. And, you know, we just want to take a lead from those like Germany, Netherlands, Greece, etc., which are starting to open up for meetings and events. And we've had one agency that joined us for one of our meetings that said that they're quite busy at the moment placing business in the Netherlands for one of our clients. So thankfully, that's one agency that's moving in the right direction. But there are two main issues as far as the M&E is concerned. Firstly, there's the social distancing, because with the 2 metre rule, all of the venues, and we work with 14 venues across the UK of all different types, they're losing 2/3 of their capacity. One venue in particular have an auditorium that will take 380. They now reckon with the 2 metre social distancing, it cuts that capacity down to 80 to 90 people, which then begs the question, is it going to be viable to open that facility when meetings can start again? And the other thing is, in order to open with reduced numbers, are they going to be able to increase their prices? And the feedback from the agents is, the agency buyers, is that their corporate clients are not looking or are not going to be that willing to see significant increases in the cost of running events in venues. And it's also a case of, can the venues actually deliver a full service with social distancing? You know, are they going to be able to offer food and beverage? What's going to happen with these venues in their kitchens and their restaurants and the likes? The other thing that we have is a lack of confidence from the buyers and the customers. But, sorry, when we do start to open up again, we're going to get the situation where, although the buyers may be willing to book events, will their delegates be willing to attend those events? And what does the industry, what does the meetings and events industry have to do to instill a sense of confidence? Because there are rumours that lawyers are going to get very very rich again, with people turning around and saying, well, my company turned around and told me I had to go to this conference. I sat in a room with 100 people. Now I've got COVID-19, but we'll have to see what happens on that one. As an industry, we're quite a resilient and inventive group, and working around the 2-meter rule, we've come across a number of venues that have been quite inventive in their approach. One of our venues, Millennium Point in Birmingham, they are now offering live streaming. So although they've got an auditorium that's down to 1/3 of its usual capacity, they can now offer at a cost a live streaming service, so they can still do the numbers. We have another venue that have just bought a huge marquee, which means that they can now do cabaret meetings for up to 300 people. It was a marquee that was supposed to be used for one of the Nightingale hospitals, apparently. And then we have another training venue where they've turned around and they've developed through a software package their TV system, and they're actually running training courses where the trainer plugs into the TV system, delivers training directly to the delegates in their meeting room, in their bedrooms. The only time they meet is for social distancing lunches. Hopefully, with the weather being fine, they can do it outside. And if and for practical exercises related to the training. The other thing that has come across in building confidence is a lot of venues now in their opening preparations are developing things, safe meetings policies. Have any of you guys come across that? Stating how they will be working with conference organizers to make sure that the safety of their delegates and the safety of the teams within the venues are put in place before the event starts. One venue in particular have also put together a document that they will send out to individual delegates stating their responsibilities when they come to the venue, what they're expected to do, where they're, if it happens, we don't know. And then Barry mentioned quality in tourism and their clean and legal accreditation. That's taking quite a lot on at the moment. We've been working with Lee Colishaw, Venues and Events, and who's pushing it forward through the Hotel Booking Agents Association at the moment, the HBAA. But with Venue Directory, the online directory for meetings and events organisers to use, they have now given venues an opportunity to add the information about their safe meetings policies, about their accreditations for quality in tourism, and help rebuild some sort of confidence back into buyers and into to delegates. So very short and sweet. I'm sorry I haven't had a PowerPoint presentation, but has anyone got any questions they'd like to raise? Barry?
Evan, thanks very much indeed for that update. I think one of the most important things you mentioned there, which those that were with us a few weeks ago when I was giving a presentation on preparing for the uplift, I talked about the importance of having your COVID statement, your COVID policy, and interesting to hear you talking there about safe meetings policy. Just a little update on that. I mean, I did some very unscientific, but just some straw polling with some online networking groups I've been in the last couple of weeks, and asking the general public, people that were joining me online at events, how important that safe system communication was going to be moving forward. I was pleasantly surprised at how strong the answer came back from people of, we want to know what you're doing, whether it's the local fruit and veg shop, whether it's the local coffee shop. We want to know what you're doing, what actions you've taken, what processes you've put in place to keep not just us safe as customers, but to keep yourselves and your staff safe. So, as I say, very unscientific, but it reaffirmed in my mind that a lot of the talk that's been going on in the industry about the need to put together your COVID statement, your safe systems of work, the public do actually care. They want to know about this. And when I was asking to rank the level of importance, was people maintaining their pricing pre-COVID? Was that the most important thing? Was people getting their shops, their businesses open as soon as possible the most important thing? Overwhelmingly, the feedback that came to me was, we want to know what you've done, and we want to come back and use your shops, use your venues, use your coffee shops, your restaurants, but we want to know that it's safe. So it just underlines that importance there, really.
Certainly does. And talking to the HBAA and some of the agents, especially those that use Gratis, the event booking software that a lot of venues use, it's key for venues to make sure that they've got information about their safe meetings policies on their venue profile. Because certainly, again, like you, I've done a bit of a straw poll and spoken to a number of agents, and they have said that their clients have specifically said that they will only book venues that have got a clear and concise safe meetings policy, and the quality in tourism, clean and legal, is going to be something that they will start looking at in the future. One of the venues that we work with, they with their catering, because that's one of the biggest issues with some venues, is because kitchens aren't particularly big or whatever, they're looking at doing picnic type arrangements where each individual delegate has a picnic box that they go and sit in the gardens or whatever. But one venue said that they will continue doing buffets, and the way they're doing it is their buffet will have a screen in front of it. You won't help yourself, but there will be members of the team who will go along, and as a guest, you'll go and say, I'll have some of that, I'll have some of that, some of that, some of that. And they will actually plate it up and place it into a box at the end of the buffet table. You go along, collect it, and then go and sit in the dining room. That same venue are also introducing a delegate registration, online registration facility that organisers can use. And if you're going to stay there, you can register you can check in online as well, which I know is not, the airlines do it all the time, don't they, Luke?
Yeah, and I was going to pick up, it's very interesting because one of the organisations I've been doing some bits and pieces with is the Walt Disney Group.
Okay.
And their reopening of obviously their operations. Now, a lot of that is, for example, meeting characters, but when you come to look at the events, so a lot of the big events they've shelved, as well as they've taken the approach that there'll be no buffet service whatsoever across any of their properties, because they've deemed it as too risky. So it's actually really interesting to hear what other organisations are doing elsewhere and how it's working.
See, the other issues that a lot of venues have is how do they handle residential meetings and events? And we've got a couple of venues, and the way they're doing it, one venue in particular has got, within their grounds, they've got 5 specific blocks. So you've got a block of 40 rooms, a meeting space that will take up to 80 people, and syndicate rooms. So what they're going to do is they'll cut down on the numbers that actually go there, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for example, they use the Wickham block, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they'll use another block and the Wickham block will then have to stay empty for 72 hours, be deep cleaned before they can use it again the following week. So there are ways around it. The other thing that was quite interesting from a conversation with one of the big international agents was the fact that they don't see any big events, that's 100 plus, 100 up to 1,000 plus, actually starting to take off, like you were saying, Luke, until Q3, Q4 of next year. In the meantime, it's going to be small meetings and potentially training for the 15s to 20s where they can use the space. But the big thing that the big issue is this 2 metre social distancing. And we know that overseas in, I think it's the Netherlands, they're reducing it to 1.5 and then 1 metre later on this year. But some of our venues are saying that it won't be viable for them to open the doors because the clients aren't going to want to pay the extra. I know there were some comments about the Pig Hotel making a supplementary charge for COVID-free whatever. But the corporate buyers for meetings and events are saying, they will take a hit, but they're not going to take a huge hit. And then the venues are now starting to look at it and say, well, you know, is it going to be worth opening the doors? On the plus side, there are rumours, and I must admit they are rumours, that potentially the UK will go down to 1 metre social distancing, probably September, October. That will help venues considerably because it will then make it viable to open their doors.
Yeah, and I think there's also, I mean, the other big thing is the whole legal aspect. And as I messaged you, Kevin, there's already big discussions around Corporate Manslaughter Act, and somebody contracts COVID and unfortunately dies. There are a couple of companies I know of that are whose lawyers are very, very risk adverse by that, and have basically said no, until there's a vaccine, you can't hold any meetings, you can't have people in a confined space, because we really don't know what's going on.
I completely understand that, but anecdotally, I was talking to someone who got involved. Apparently in Las Vegas, they've been having big events over the last month, and apparently the legal eagles and the insurance companies have got together and to put together a specific insurance policy so they can limit the liability. But then, is the liability down to the organizer for getting people to go there, or is it the liability down to the venue because they haven't done a proper deep clean or whatever? And that apparently is quite a big discussion at the moment.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going to with that comment around discussions. It's not like who holds the liability. Is it the event provider or is it the employer?
Some fascinating, genuinely fascinating points there that we can explore as time goes on. Kevin, thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thanks for your input. From some discussions with event organisers that I've been having recently, one consistent message that's come out there is that short to medium term, online is here with us. It's here to stay, and from the event management, event organizer perspective, they see very much the remainder of this year being all online, hopefully with a move to hybrid form of events next year. The thing that struck me with those conversations, and something I just want to plant in, particularly in venue owners and operators' minds right now, as an industry, investing in really good quality Wi-Fi is not something we've been consistently good at across the board. I'm sure we've all been in some quite big event venues, some where the accessibility to Wi-Fi is great, and some where really it doesn't meet your expectation in terms of being able to get on board. I think the one thing we can be sure of from an events perspective is that online and this hybrid form of some face-to-face, some online events is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. I know it's a cost factor, but something that I would plant in your heads and encourage you to think about is just how good actually is the Wi-Fi in your venue. Is that something you need to be thinking about maybe when funds are available to start putting some capital investment in next year, the year after? That's one of the things I would encourage you to jump up your list. Folks, thanks very much indeed. Conscious of time, we've got, I just briefly before we wrap up, want to go to Kirsty Duck, our resident HR advisor who's been with us for a number of these events. Kirsty, just wanted to give you the floor for a couple of minutes. I believe you've some update information, particularly regarding JRS and the furlough scheme.
Yeah, hot off the press. So this was fun for all the HR people over the weekend, trying to work out how flexible furlough works, which also has the acronym of FFS, which is quite rude. But anyway, my top tips in order not to keep you too long. Let me put my specs on, hold on. So the normal furlough arrangements continue until the end of the month. Okay, so as they are. From the 1st of July, the flexible furlough kicks in. So you'll be able to have your workers in on reduced hours for any work pattern, okay? You need to, it's a good plan to sort of plan for this. What work patterns do you need? And then you need to pass them put your proposals forward to the workplace, to your workers, and confirm those work patterns in writing. Then I'm just going to give you the headlines. Really, I'll arrange for this to be sent out to you all, so you can have a very interesting read of that. There is a restriction on how many employees you can claim for a single period, and that can only be the maximum number of people you claimed previously, which I would imagine is your maximum staff anyway, because I think most of you would have closed down operations, but for some businesses that's quite a problem. So employees no longer have to be on furlough for a minimum of 3 weeks from the 1st of July. But if you took somebody off furlough now, had them working for a bit, and then put them back on furlough on, say, June the 29th, because that furlough started in June, you'd have to keep them on for another 3 weeks. And then the next lot of furlough could be that flexible furlough. So you just got, there's some little nuances there. But again, like I said, I'll send this through and you can have a little read. And you won't be able to make claims across calendar months. So they want claims to sort of be more calendar month based. So if you have staff in working, you have to pay them at 100% from your budgets. For those other days that they're not working, they remain on the furlough, which the government pays at the 80%. You can still ask them to take holiday as well if you want them to try and use up any holiday owing to them. They can continue to work for somebody else if they want to. So my 3 top tips are: 1, plan your work patterns you think will best meet your needs for your business. Run them past your teams and get approval. Budget for how you're going to fund those amounts, going back to Robin's presentation. So remember, as from the 1st of August, you're going to be responsible for national insurance and tax and things. From the 1st of September, you're going to be responsible for, the government will only fund up to 70%, so you need to pick up that other 20%, other 10%. In October, the government will only fund 60%, so you need to pick up that other 20%. So you need to budget. And the third thing, make sure you talk to staff and seek their agreement to the proposals, because effectively they're a change to terms and conditions. So you just want to make sure it's all done lawfully, so you don't get tripped up in the future. So that's the quick thing. It's more in plain English here. I'll get that sent over to you all. Done.
Kirsty, thanks very much indeed. Folks, I'm very conscious of everybody's time. It's very kind of you to give us your attention and your time this morning. We're very grateful for that. Hope that you found those presentations this morning from our key speakers of value and of great use. There's a lot going on at the moment. The final word from me, just before I hand back to Robin to wrap things up. As I've said at most of these forums over the last 3 months, it's tough out there. It is tough out there for all of us, but there's also a lot of help and a lot of support out there. I know, as poacher turned gamekeeper, as hotel operator who now is in the supply chain for the hospitality industry, we're not always the first to reach out and ask for support and ask for help, but there is an awful lot of help and support out there right now. I really encourage you. We're building quite a community in this forum, and we're all very open and very accessible. Even if it's just to have a chat, even if it's just to get something off your chest, reach out, because there's a lot of people there that can help. And often just that second opinion, that objective look at something from somebody who's not stuck right in the situation that you're in, can often really help you to see beyond it and actually get a practical solution in place. And thanks ever so much for joining us again this morning. Look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks' time. And for a final wrap up, let me hand over to Robin.
Thank you very much, Barry. I hope you've all enjoyed it as usual and gained something from today's forum. As usual, I'll be sending out the summary afterwards with contacts of people and some various supplier information as well. I always recommend you have a look at some of this, because it's suppliers that I've picked up information about over the sort of like fortnight or whatever, who may be used with dealing with this whole situation. So it's always good to take a look at them. we will be back on the 30th, 10 o'clock as usual. Meanwhile, I'll probably send out a survey in the next week, just asking if you could please just say what you think is good, what you think is bad, where do you think we could improve, and how we can take this forward after lockdown, because I think it's always important that the industry talks to each other, and I think there's always something new happening, especially even once we go out of lockdown. And I'd like to be able to continue this on for sort of like the future. So once again, thank you very much, everybody, and look forward to seeing you again in the future.
A couple of words before we go, Robin. Thanks very much for everything. Restructuring is the name of the game that everyone needs to be looking at. Some of you on this forum have already done so, but I think that's something everybody needs to look at, because you're going to have to restructure. You're not going to go back to the structure that you had previously. The other thing is credit control. And I think previous customers that you've had that you gave credit to, would they be as creditworthy going forward? How is their cash flow situation now that they've been locked down for 3 months? So you might have to refuse credit to certain people. You're certainly going to have to review it and be very strict on it, because that's going to affect your cash flow if you're giving people credit that are not going to pay you within your terms. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for everything to everyone who's contributed today, and goodbye from me.
Cameron, thanks indeed. As always, very pertinent points there. As we've said a number of times, cash flow is king, and the key to that is actually getting the cash in the first place. Very much the time to be reviewing all of your payment policies and who you give that very valuable credit out to. Folks, thanks for joining us again this morning. As we've said before, look forward to seeing you on the 30th. Keep safe, keep busy, and any help, advice, support, or just a bit of a shoulder to have a grumble on, there's many of us here in this group. Robin will be sending out links to the various documents that we've commented on today, contact details for everyone later today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Many thanks and all the best.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Cheers, Robin. See you later.
Bye.